Ever wondered how your computer manages to juggle all its tasks seamlessly? From running apps to storing files, there's one unsung hero behind it all, the operating system. But here's the real question. Do you truly understand how it works and how to make the most of it? Whether you're struggling with slow performance, confusing file management, or just want to unlock your device's full potential, this video is your ultimate guide. Discover the secrets of operating systems from Windows to Linux and learn how to optimize your tech like a pro. Ready to take control? Let's dive in. Introduction to Operating Systems. As you have already seen in previous courses, a computer is composed of a processor, RAM, a hard drive, etc. As you know, the processor is meant to do calculations as well as other processing. It is the one that is responsible for retrieving the data, then doing processing before providing results. But where do you think the processor will get this data from to be able to do the processing? Well, it's from another component, which is the RAM memory. Yet another question. In your opinion, how is the data provided to the RAM? Well, it's by using an input device, such as a keyboard. And how can we recover the result of this processing? Simply using a screen, which is an output device. Now, the real question to ask yourself is who manages all its interactions between all these components, and who also gives you the possibility to communicate? Well, you probably guessed it, because that's the title of the lesson. It's about the operating system. An operating system is a program that allows you to exploit and manage communication between hardware resources, whether it's a processor, a memory, or any other equipment. It is this that provides users with an interface with the computer. This allows us to send orders and to get results in return. Now we'll see some common features across different operating systems. Any operating system allows you as a user organize your data into directories, store files on your drive, delete files, and even to rename or move them. We stop there because the list is endless. Hardware resource management. The second thing that an operating system necessarily supports is the management of hardware resources. As a user, you use apps, which communicate directly with your operating system. Well, you should know that these applications use hardware resources. These types of resources are managed by your operating system without you knowing it. For example, in the Windows Task Manager, which you can open by doing a Ctrl+Alt+Delete, well, you can see the use of your different processes that the operating system manages. Management and administration tools. It is also the one that allows you to perform administrative tasks such as performance analysis, memory diagnosis, disk cleanup, etc. We will now go into more detail about the operating system, and more specifically that of Windows. There are several clients editions such as Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, and lately the famous Windows 11. We also have server-only editions such as Windows Server 2008, the 2012-2016, a Windows Server 2019. To find out which version to turn to, all you have to do is press the Windows key on your keyboard and to launch the System Environment menu. In the Windows Specifications section, you will find the edition of your operating system. This is Windows 10 Pro. Right below that, you have your operating system version. This gives you the advantage of knowing if you're behind schedule for frequent Windows updates. For example, I'm in the 22H2 version. We are now going to talk about a term to know which is the source code, which allows the operating system to work. It is important to know that some operating systems are open source. An open source system is an operating system that can be analyzed and modified by any user. For example, Linux is an open source operating system, and its opposite is the closed system, which means that only an owner or developer can modify or review the code. As an example of a closed system, we have Windows to Microsoft and Apple OS X. We will now talk about Shell, so nothing to do with the Shell gas station. Remember, we said that the user can interact with the operating system using an app. Well, this application can be either on the command line or with the help of a graphical interface. The shell is in fact a program, usually without a GUI, that runs on the operating system and allows the user to send commands to the system using text. On Windows, there are the CMD command prompt and the PowerShell tool, the graphical user interface, GUI. The opposite of the command line is what's called the graphical user interface, which can be found with the initials of GUI, graphical user interface. These applications are generally developed to facilitate the user's interaction with the operating system using a mouse, a keyboard, a touchpad, or any other input device. These applications allow you to communicate with the computer using graphic images and icons, which makes the user experience much more enjoyable. We will now talk about the notion of 32 bits or 64 bits. These terms are used in the processor architecture. The number 32 or 64 is the number of bits that memory can support. For example, a 32-bit architecture corresponds to 2 exponent 32. This gives the equivalent of 4 gigabytes, whereas with 64 bits, it gives 2 exponent 64. That's more than 16 billion gigabytes. No need to go into details, but you should know that a 32-bit architecture can manage up to 4 gigabytes of RAM memory, while in 64-bit, well, there is no limit. Because in any case, you will never install 16 billion gigabyte in your PC. Basically, if you have more than 4 gigabytes of memory in your PC, well, the ideal is to run your operating system on a 64-bit architecture. I don't know if you remember, but in the early days of video game consoles, you could know the power of the machine based on the number of bits it managed. For example, the simple Nintendo could handle 8-bit. This gave 2 exponent 8 or 256 colors displayed on the screen. Then we had the Super Nintendo, with its 16 bits, it seems to me. Then there was the arrival of Sony on the console market, with its 32-bit PlayStation, and Nintendo's response with its famous Nintendo 64 and the Golden Eyes game. For my part, the games that marked me the most at the time were Final Fantasy VII with its box of 3 CDs, and Resident Evil 1, which was seriously scary. Well, enough talk about nostalgia, and let's get back to our small operating systems. To check the installed version on your operating system, well, it's always in the System menu. Here, you can see that I'm in 64 bits. In terms of compatibility, it is important to know that an application that runs in 64-bit will not be able to work properly on a 32-bit system. On the other hand, no problem in the other direction. That is, a 32-bit app will run smoothly on a 64-bit system. This is why on 64-bit systems, you will find 2 program directories, the /back program files, x86 directory for 32-bit applications, and the /back program files directory for 64-bit applications, operating systems for computers. Now, let's move on to a small summary about the different operating systems on the market for computers. Microsoft Windows. And let's start with the most widespread, which is the Microsoft Windows operating system. It is a system that is not open source. That is, the source code is not made available to users. Here's what the Windows desktop looks like in version 11. The advantages of this system include support for a large industry. This allows it to support most of the equipment that exists on the market and a wide variety of applications. Among its disadvantages are that it pays off and that it is the favorite target of cyber attacks because it is the most widespread system throughout the world, especially among individuals. Now let's move on to Apple's operating system, which is macOS. It's not an open source system either. Here is the representation of the desktop of a PC running on macOS. Among these advantages are that it is easy to use. It is also extremely compatible with Apple's hardware, logical, since at the beginning it was designed only for Apple machines. That there are far fewer security issues on this system, and also that the blue screen does not exist. For the disadvantages, that it can only run on Apple's hardware. Since it is not open source, it is not supported enough in the industry, and it is much more expensive than its competitors. Now, let's move on to Linux operating systems, which are completely open source. That is to say, that they are free, and that, if you are a developer, and well, you can contribute without problem to its improvement. Linux is only the kernel and is found in several distributions such as Ubuntu, Debian, Red Hat, Fedora, or CentOS. Here is the desktop of the Ubuntu distribution. The Linux system has some advantages. First of all, you can download it for free, and you won't have to pay any license to use it. Secondly, it is that the operating system is compatible with a wide variety of hardware. And on top of that, you can benefit from a huge support from a very active and passionate community. And for the disadvantages, well, this operating system is still very limited in terms of support. Operating systems for phones and tablets. Now, let's move on to a small summary about the different operating systems used by mobile phones and tablets. Windows Mobile is Microsoft's operating system for mobile phones and tablets. Google Android is Google's operating system, which is also intended for mobile phones and tablets. It is an open-source system based on Linux, which is supported by many manufacturers. On the Apple side, we have Apple iOS, which is of course reserved only for iPhone or iPad owners. It's a system also based on Linux, but it's not open source. And the latest is the Chrome OS system. Based on the Linux kernel, it is used in all Chromebook laptops, and it is also used on the Google Chrome browser. It is thanks to it that we can work with a whole bunch of web applications. Vendor-specific limitations. Let's change the subject to talk about the initials, EOL, end of life, which is an expression commonly used by software publishers to indicate that a product or its version is at the end of its life. Many companies, such as Microsoft, announce end-of-life dates on their products well in advance. Every Windows product has a life cycle. The life cycle begins when the product is released and ends when it is no longer supported by support. Now, let's move on to OS updates, which help keep your device safe from outside threats. Updates are essential for the security and reliability of your computer. This helps protect against any malicious attack. For operating systems, iOS, Android, and Windows, updates are done manually by the user. As long as on the Chrome OS system, well, it's installed automatically. Compatibility between operating systems. And to finish this course on the different operating systems, let's quickly talk about their compatibility. All the systems we have just seen can use a large number of well-known formats. For example, TXT format, the PDF, or MP3, MP4, etc. On the other hand, executables are generally not suitable to run on another system, for which it would not have been designed. For example, on Windows, it's .exe apps, and on Android, it's called a .pk app. For this reason, it is best to work with web applications, as they can be used on any operating system. All you have to do is install a browser to be able to run them.